It's nice to talk to you again. Yeah, so thank you for spending your time with us for this conversation. As we know, Ms. Norms, the DNR-BMB has been a strong partner of UNDP po, no? So matagal na po namin kayong ka-work. Personally, I've been working with you for quite some time already, and I'm happy to note po that every time that we work with you, it's really been a breeze since we are able to produce our outputs and actually foster partnerships po, not only with BMB but also with other partners po, no, sa ating environment sector. So since we started, Ms. Norms, with programs related sa ating mga katutubong kapatid, like we started through the new conservation areas in the Philippines project, Philippine ICCA, also in SGP5. I'd like to ask Ms. Norms, with all these initiatives po, can you share with us how do you translate these results into higher level of governance in the Philippines to ensure stronger and scalable participation among our stakeholders?
First of all, magandang umaga muna sa iyo and to Alisa and the rest of the team ng UNDP, and maraming salamat for the invitation extended to the Bureau, to the Biodiversity Management Bureau in the celebration ng National IP Month. Yes, Tess, namimiss ko na yung grupo natin sa New Cap.
Yes, ma'am.
It's nice working with you, and ayun na nga, hindi naman natapos doon sa New Cap yung ating working relationship and even personal relationship, di ba? So, ayun, we still continue the work na sinimula ng New Cap. Marami nang nangyari since 2010. Hanggang nag-end yung project. And then, of course, we have the Philippine ICCA project. Andun pa rin kayo na tumutulong sa amin on this initiative concerning the IPs or the indigenous people sa ating mga protected areas in particular. Now, going back dun sa question mo, how did we translate into a national level yung work natin sa IPs, even IP rights and and other concerns related to IPs. You know for a fact that even we had yung nauna muna yung National Integrated Protected Areas System Act or RA 7586. Alam naman natin doon na medyo malaki yung provision regarding the IP concern sa mga protected areas, and we kind of included that concerns and also learning from the lessons we had when we implemented yung new CAP and then the Philippine ICCA project. You were able to include some related provisions sa expanded NIPAS Act with regards to the concerns on IPs in protected areas. Well, in fact, in the statement of declaration of policy under NIPAS Act, we have kind of influenced our legislators to include yung recognition ng mga mga conservation initiatives and regimes being undertaken by our IPs and the local community surrounding yung ating mga protected areas, and of course some kind of yung tinatawag kasi natin na ecosystem-based conservation measures. And dito kasi pumapaloob yung mga, though hindi siya part of the formal protected areas that we have in what we call National Integrated Protected Areas, but there's a recognition of the efforts and initiatives ng indigenous local communities and local communities doing work on biodiversity, kasi this is very much related doon sa, if you can recall, yung ating target 11 of the Aichi target 11 of Aichi targets for conservation of biodiversity. And we know for a fact na hindi rin naman kasi kumbaga if we measure yung yung extent ng coverage under target 11, which is 17% of the terrestrial and 10% of the marine areas, kailangan mo pa rin i-extend or i-consider yung work na ginagawa ng mga IPs and local communities to conserve biodiversity. So kasama rin yun doon sa bilang na kino-consider sa target 11. So this is how we had tawag nito siguro elevated yung concerns on the IPs and local communities doon sa tinatawag na governance ng biodiversity and conservation, and of course this is translated na rin doon sa ating mga protected areas, being marami kasi rin sa mga protected areas natin ay part of the ancestral domains din ng ating mga indigenous communities. So siguro yun yung isang way namin.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Norms. And I've seen that I think I can say that we've gone so far together po as partners, no, in terms of really recognizing and promoting itong ating rights ng ating mga katutubong kapatid. And alam ko po that the journey was not that easy, no? Lagi pong mahaba, lagi pong mahabang usapin ito when we talk about protected areas, ancestral lands. But it's good to see po how partnerships have been formed and how the Biodiversity Management Bureau po and the IP communities have really started working together and aligning po yung mga interest natin po, especially that right now with COVID, no, mas kailangan po nating magtulungan. Ms. Norms, when it comes to project interventions po, would you be able to actually specify or magkwento po kung ano po ba talaga yung mga interventions na we've undertaken that really stand out in terms of when we talk about paradigm shift po in doing conservation work?
Unang-una is because of the project, New Cap in particular, you kind of encourage us to remember yung work natin on the National Protected Area System Master Plan. Work na in fact kayo yung nag-start sa project nung stock taking for the master plan. So we had already the master plan. We're doing na lang kasi yung parang finishing touches on that and be able to level up by way of adoption of the master plan by the DNR. So part of the master plan is also yung work then on the recognition of indigenous peoples and communities, local communities in relation to work ng conservation ng biodiversity, and that is primarily considering also the hindi naman siguro although hindi nga lang siya part ng yung minamention ko kaninang formal system of protected area management. And then from there there are quite a number of projects that we had and actually will be implementing, although it's work of another division in the Biodiversity Management Bureau. For example, from the new CAP, the ICCA, at the same time we have the Biodiversity Partnership Program, and one of the initiatives under that is also recognition of the ICCAs, especially in areas ng Mindanao. In particular also in the work na ginawa on I think in the designation din ng Mount Hamiguitan Wildlife Sanctuary as a World Heritage Site. And we consider yung mga area surrounding the Mount Hamiguitan as parang local conservation work din yun. And although hindi naman directly na merong IPs doon sa area, but then again, because of the NewCap din na na initiatives, we were able to make use of the buffer zone as some kind of local conservation work ng communities, and in this time in particular with the local government units. So we have also the Protected Area Management Enhancement Program with 𝗕𝗍𝗃. A lot of ICCAs and all local conservation areas were part of that project to primarily enhance yung protected area management, not only the NEPAS areas but also yung outside ng NEPAS areas. I think we have also upcoming na projects or ongoing na yata yung Biodiversity Corridor Program. And one of the initiatives being considered in that program is, of course, since we're talking biodiversity corridors, so naturally we have to think of yung mga conservation areas na along or within the biodiversity corridors na hindi pa naman siya nako-consider as really part of the system, pero nire-recognize na rin yung yung effort na yung in terms of work on biodiversity. So, ano pa ba yung mga I think narinig ko rin yung from there's also a biodiversity key conservation area project in Bataan along Manila Bay. So I think they are also considering yung yung ICCAs in that particular na area, kasi remember niyo doon sa Philippine ICCA project, isa sa mga ICCA areas or ICCA project sites rather ng ICCA is the Bataan areas, and I think part din ng Subic. And these were where UNDP had a support through the ICCA program. So merong sasambot pa rin sa mga activities or initiatives na yon as part of the strategies in implementing naman the other projects ng Biodiversity Management Bureau. So yun, I think during the session 1, I mentioned na ICCA is really a trailblazing initiative, and thanks for the UNDP in supporting us in this endeavor, kasi this is in support to strengthening then yung protected area system that we have, along with, of course, the work being done by our indigenous indigenous peoples.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Norms. And you're right po, we are actually slowly but surely starting the Biodiversity Corridor project. And through that project, actually, madami po tayong stakeholders na kakausapin, the local government units, itong ating mga PAMBs, plus of course our indigenous people communities, because through that project, we would like to promote a stronger corridor approach po, such that all stakeholders at the site level in Mindoro Island and Eastern Mindanao po will actually be able to converge ang kanila pong mga efforts. So everything that we do with our indigenous people communities, Ms. Norms, I know are towards achieving the targets po ng PBSAP, no? So I'm sure there will be soon a midterm review of the PBSAP, and we'll know po how we have achieved so far itong ating mga commitments sa PBSAP. So I'd like to ask Ms. Norms, how do we ensure as the government agency primarily mandated to take the lead in the implementation of the PBSAP that these commitments are achieved among with the stakeholders that we are partnering with?
Ayoko muna pangunahin yung yung division na nagli-lead in the implementation of the PBSAP, kasi one slice of the PBSAP yung protected area management. But balik ulit tayo dun sa protected areas, kasi yun yung work namin, and that's our contribution as a National Parks Division to the achievement of PBSAP accomplishment of the PBSAP or the implementation of the PBSAP. So Given that sa protected areas kasi we have these concerns din sa IPs, and our work is one is of course enriching and strengthening their participation doon sa protected area management board. Given that kasi it's really one of the important provisions kasi under the INIPAS Act that IPs hindi naman should be able to have that opportunity to have a voice doon sa protected area management board. And ang maganda kasi under the new law, which is the INIPAS Act, is that all protected areas with IPs, with concerns on IPs, or IPs are present in the protected area, the management board should be able to create or establish the coordination and complementation committee, so that all concerns ng IPs are really addressing that committee, then elevate that to the PAMB. And of course, they have yung direct participation dun sa management ng protected areas. So at the beginning, when we had yung yung NIPAS Act, medyo mahirap pagkaintindihan kasi most of us are coming from different kumbaga different sector, and then we have really to make adjustments dun sa sa pag-intindi sa mga indigenous peoples. So ang aming way towards in relation to the achieving the PBSAP is yung protected areas, which is our main task. So for all the projects that we will have and undergoing for protected areas, surely na andun lagi yung concern ng ng IPs, not only sa protected areas itself, but also yung doon sa ICCAs and other ecosystem-based conservation measures. From the projects that I have mentioned, on our own din kasi we're doing yung cultural mapping ng mga IPs natin, of course with the help of the NCCA. We're doing this for those may mga IPs or IP communities in our ASEAN heritage parks. And our primary objective in doing the cultural mapping is to be able to further strengthen yung yung documentation at the same time ng traditional practices nila that would really help in the effective management of our protected areas. We have already started this this initiative with in coordination with the national NCCA arts and culture and arts. And then of course we still have that commitment with the IP communities, in particular with Bukluran, to continue the advocacy for the ICCA bill. Sorry, I missed this opportunity to mention this kanina, but I think this will be further discussed in the next session, but with Jong. And we would like also to extend our appreciation to Jong for really participating in the consultations that we had for the IRR of the INIPAS Act. Given that we're still committed to continue our effort, assist Bukluran in their advocacy work for Congress in particular, to be able to have the ICCA bill turn into a law that would further assist yung mga IP communities in relation to conservation of biodiversity or work on the biodiversity conservation. So that's it. Given that, siguro that that ends my response to your query kanina, and I hope that I have provided the information that you need for this event.
Thank you, Ms. Norms. Salamat po. Definitely po, yung aking pong kwentuhan takes us back to the days when we were implementing new CAP, no? And Philippine ICCA project, and all these works po that you have started also with our other development partners. I'm also happy to note that you have sustained the partnership with Bukluran. I think that's really a milestone po. And we hope that through the Biodiversity Corridor Project, we'll be able to further advance po itong ating work on ICCAs. Aside from the Biodiversity Management Bureau of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, we have another government agency partner that has been working with us in forwarding or advancing the interests of our Indigenous people communities. The National Commission on Indigenous Peoples has been at the forefront together with our IP communities in pushing for the ratification of the ICCA Bill since 2019. To tell us more about it, we have Commissioner Jong Navarro with us. Magandang umaga po, Commissioner Jong. It's good to see you today, right? Virtually po.
Yes, good morning to you too. Good morning to everyone, Ma'am Norma, Tess, and Alisa.
Yeah, so to start our kwentuhan, Commissioner Jong, can you please tell us what are the salient points of this ICCA bill, and why do we actually push this policy? Over to you, Sir Jong.
Oh, okay. The ICCA bill is nothing new, no? It's in fact, you can consider it the oldest form of sustaining the ecosystem. It is it's basically in reference to the bill, by the way, the bill recognizes the contribution of indigenous peoples in sustaining ecosystems, including biodiversity. So it acknowledges in no uncertain terms that, simply put, the way of life, the culture, the IKSP of indigenous peoples, whether it's their customs and traditions, the ethical, economical, political, traditional cultural expressions, even spiritual practices, contribute to the conservation of ecosystems.
Thank you, Commissioner Jong, for that brief but very clear description of this ICCA bill. Commissioner Jong, if I may ask, how do we actually envision the IP governance over the ancestral lands given this ICCA bill? Would there be changes? What development do we actually foresee when it comes to the implementation of this ICCA bill? Hopefully soonest po.
Okay, on the practical, pragmatic level, no? See, the bill, well, like I said, in explicit terms, recognizes the governance of indigenous people, and that this governance is not incompatible. In fact, is supportive of biodiversity and ecosystem conservation. So, whereas currently protected areas are defined by the government, this allows indigenous peoples, it recognizes the identification by the indigenous peoples of their protected areas. What does it mean? When they have declared it as their protected area, then it falls under a whole spectrum of protections and considerations. Like what? Like they themselves will determine that only traditional practices are allowed, because that's what's been proven to have conserved these areas. So over above anything, the indigenous knowledge system to practice prevails in the area declared as ICCA. Yun nga ICCA, di ba, yung indigenous cultural communities conserved areas. So even the terminology used for the bill or the concept of the ICCA really is a determination of what is a conserved area. Another part and parcel of this is that, kasi if you imagine in the Philippines, we have about 1,000 ancestral domains. So in that 1,000 ancestral domains, you will have, I would guess, a minimum of 1,000 IKSPs related to the environment. From when do they plant, what are the areas that absolutely they don't want to touch, when do they hunt, when do they whatever, no? Or they can only use these kinds of seeds, not this other one, or they cannot, they only perform Sweden farming, or ganito na lang, when to cut or what to cut, and what quantities kunwari. Kasi hindi naman purely strict protection zone na walang use, walang strict no-go zone. Almost not always, ICCAs are multi-use areas. So the IKSP involves for those 1,000, yun na lang ating assumption, 1,000 IKSP variables, and then multiplied it with the 1,000 ancestral domains. Imagine if we have to study all those variables before we can start recognizing the IKSP as effective. It will be too burdensome, for, in fact, I would say impossible, to validate each and every IKSP, whether they are biodiversity friendly or not. This bill or the law, the proposed law, will presume already that all IKSPs are as empirically proven, is ecologically friendly. Yun. So it reiterates the governance of IPs on the area. It also again reiterates the FPIC, and it strengthens the IP governance and self-determination through this, almost you could say, auto limitation on their own with respect to their population, and to the others when they declare what their ICCA is.
Thanks, Commissioner Jong, for articulating very well how the ICCA bill will be able to help po, no, yung governance ng ating mga IP communities over their ancestral lands. BSAP and ICCA bill are actually proofs of how we give importance to our IP communities. At the end of the day, what we would like to see is to actually have an improved welfare po among our IP communities. So I would like to ask po, how do you think these three policy interventions can actually concretely support po, no, the improved welfare of our IP communities? Thank you. Perhaps we can have Ms. Norma first, and then Commissioner Jong. Thank you.
Thank you, Tess. Because it's a law, kung magiging law na talaga siya, then it strengthens the ICCA and the recognition of ICCA as a mechanism for conservation and biodiversity. It will also strengthen yung governance, as mentioned by Kong Jong kanina, that with the ICCA bill and later as a law, it strengthened further the governance of the IPs over the areas. And of course, it gives the opportunity to really recognize, hindi lang simpleng recognition, but it's backed up by law that really the IPs are doing their, through their indigenous knowledge and practices, they are able to really manage and protect their own areas for conservation, which is the main reason why we do recognize yung effort na yun. And it's a long, siguro overdue, if I may say so, na they've been doing this for, sabihin na natin, for million of years, pero hindi siya appropriately nare-recognize. So given the possible passage of the law, it would really strengthen this effort na ito yung ginagawa ng mga IPs for conservation ng ating biological diversity.
Thank you, Ms. Norms. Commissioner Jong.
Yeah, thank you for this particular question. I'd really like to get into it if you don't mind. No?
Yes.
The operation of the INAIPAS, PBSAP, and the ICCA bill can really improve the welfare of the IPs in the country. It brings to fore some issues, though, that I'd like to get deeper to or on. Okay. Well, the Philippine PBSAP integrates the Philippines' obligations under the CBD, as we all know, including the 20-point 𝗕𝗍𝗄𝗏 biodiversity targets. For those who are not familiar, the PBSAP targets that by 2028 there will be a 10% increase in the area from the 2015 levels of the particularly terrestrial inland wetlands managed through NAIPAS, okay, and other conservation measures like the ICCA. Okay. Now, there have been several articles that says that the 𝗕𝗍𝗄𝗏 has 20 targets. The ICCs play a role in all those 20 targets, and there's been a finding published in COP 12, I believe, that says that even says that it cannot be met. The target cannot be met without the operation of the ICCAs. There's several studies that show that targets 1, 2, 3, 5, so and so forth. Ang wala lang ata 15 to 17. That those targets cannot be achieved without ICCAs or the framework of ICCAs integrated into the programs to achieve the 𝗕𝗍𝗄𝗏 targets. Now, that's where I have some not reservation, worries, no? Si Ma'am Norma, kasama na, sabi nga niya, kasama ako sa nung kanilang nag-consultation. And we more or less have, that was a good experience because there was a synergy between government, the IP agency of government, the CSOs, kasama Bukluran, and other groups, no? Kasama ka ata doon, no, Ma'am Tess? Ang problema, DIA-R approved by everyone was not the one eventually approved by DNR. Hindi naman, I'm not laying blame here. No? So, Ma'am Norma, alam ko magkasundo kami dyan sa IRR. Talaga lang nag-iba yung version, ano? And that's where the problem is because the IR does not recognize the governance of the IPs. So let's play with that. No? Let's play with that. If 96% of the KBAs, 96% of the 101 KBAs in the country are in ancestral domains, and we are saying that from time immemorial, the practices of the IPs have been recognized as effective, and yet we take that away, the operation of the IKSPs, then we are actually removing a formula that's already working. And that's what DIA-R is doing. The maganda yung law, the INAIPAS law, I really support, particularly Section 13 and 15, among other provisions. In very explicit terms, the Section 13 says the governance and the obligation shall be given to the IPs for the conservation and management of the ancestral domain, the overlap areas. Kung ganun ang recognition nga sa protected area, di what more sa non-protected areas? So in regular ancestral domains na merong environment na kailangan conserve or KBAs, even KBAs, kung hindi nga protected area, di lalo sanang mapalakas yung governance ng IPs. Hindi naman to absolute kasi what is being recognized is the STRR or the Sustainable Traditional Resource Rights. By sheer definitions, these are the practices of the IPs that, well, the presumption is they all work. Pero if it's proven na it's not biodiversity or environmentally friendly, then it can still be questioned. Hindi naman absolute na basta IP, sinabi na IP to, tama na to. Hindi naman din ganun, di ba? There are mechanisms to show, to make corrections. But on the onset, to give that recognition of IKSP as what's been empirically shown as being effective. So these three operating together to achieve the IT targets, or well, yun naman target ng ating ng PBSAP, PBSAP. So really, not just the IPs, but everyone really benefits from achieving those targets, and it is operated through the ICCA and the INAIPAS. Yun yung concept sana noon. Yun na muna. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Jong. It's always good to listen to your reflections po, no? It helps us think more about how our policy support interventions can really, at the end of the day, help improve the welfare of our Indigenous people communities. And thank you also for bringing out those issues, because I think it's good to actually have a discussion on the issues and concerns that are real and should also be clarified among the stakeholders. You've actually touched upon my next question, Commissioner Jong, on partnerships among stakeholders. I've also seen how the efforts on INAIPAS, PBSAP, and ICCA Bill have provided opportunities, an open space for all stakeholders to be straight about what they think about these policy interventions, what they think should be done by the stakeholders. And I was actually happy seeing those convergence come together. Although, of course, may kanya-kanya tayong frustrations, but I think it's good to see that we're doing something together. And I'd like to ask Ms. Norms and Commissioner Jong again on the partnerships, stakeholder partnerships that we have been able to establish while working on the INAIPAS, PBSAP, and ICCA Bill, and also on how these policy support interventions have started to really highlight the on-site conservation work na ginagawa po ng ating mga katutubong kapatid noon pa man. No? Sige po. Ms. Norms, would you like to start sharing po?
I think yung partnership continues kasi otherwise nag-stop na sana tayo for, well, one thing is we have this kind of event, diba? And to some extent, the Bureau were invited to several events regarding IPs. And then, alam niyo naman yung Bureau is really extending its hands to assist for whatever we can and for whatever resources that we have. And of course, the technical assistance that we can provide given, sabihin na natin, hindi naman siguro expertise, but knowledge about biodiversity conservation and how biodiversity conservation works. So andun pa rin yung lending hand ng BMB to provide support. And considering also that we have developed some kind of kasi confidence on this partnership that we have built through the years that we were able to work together. And kahit po wala din yung mga projects na yon, we still continue communicating with NCIP in particular. And I do understand saan si Commissioner Jong is coming from when we had the consultation, and finally ibang version yung lumabas sa sa IRR. But still, we are there. I think hindi po naman kami remiss in providing providing support to this kind of initiative. Kasi we are happy, and also this is part of our mandate. And siguro without the partnership, we will not be able to achieve what we what our mandate is has put us into this agency. So we value yung partnership pong yon, and we will continue extending assistance, and siguro we will sustain pa rin yung partnership na yon, kasi without that hindi tayo lalong magkakaintindihan sa ating work. Magiging kanya-kanya tayo, and we do not want that to happen, especially if our client feels hindi naman demand, siguro need us in that aspect.
Thank you, Ms. Norms. I'd like to echo yung ginamit niyo pong word, no? Confidence. And I must say that yung confidence building that has happened po during the INAIPA's crafting, PBSAP, and of course ICCA Bill has really been a key milestone, no? Actually, not only po sa inyo, government agencies, but also for us as UNDP, no? Nakita namin how our relationships have progressed through the years. I think, as I remember, when I started in UCAP in 2011, it was actually hard to have DNR and NCIP sit together ng ganitong pag-uusap, di ba?
Yes, I remember.
Yes, those were in my younger years, no? But I'm happy na this conversation po is happening. We have NCIP, we have BMB, no? Sharing their alignment of thoughts and interest and passion, actually, no? As, when we talk about our mga katutubong kapatid po. From your end, Commissioner Jong, to hear from you, please.
Oh, yes. Yun nga, sabihin ko rin, I agree with Ma'am Norma. As long as there are people who respect openness, then we can achieve things, and understandings are minimized. No? We don't necessarily have to agree, but to listen and to consider each other's point of views. Yun naman ang importante. Yung talagang genuine, kumbaga, no? I'm just happy also that there are people who are constantly parang yung the same faces, kasi hindi naman trust building, but the fact is there's a stability in the understandings and agreements or disagreements even. You know exactly where the others are. That's what I'm happy about, seeing Ma'am Norma always there, kayo sa UNDP at sa mga CSO. Hindi naman sabing pag stranger hindi na tinatrust, pero there's always some stability brought by seeing the same very faces, talking to everyone, kumaga everyone, yun, being active in engaging everyone. If you don't mind, I'd like to go a little dramatic, no? Kasi
go ahead, Commissioner Jong.
Kasi meron akong nakakalimutang ako minsan nakakalimutan na kasama natin. And then since it's gonna eat up time, I will consider it my party message and closing remarks na rin, sana. It was I actually discussed with the commissioners last night, thinking about what di naman maiksi lang shinare ko. Pinost ko lang sa Bible group namin kasi nag-iisip ako ano pa talaga tong ICCA, and how important is it? How important is it? Eto medyo magkakaroon ng logic jumps, pero in some I think it's still true. The CBD is a product of all countries getting together for the survival of the human species of the earth, no? That was the purpose of the CBD. And this is being operationalized through the 80 targets, which is being embodied in the PBSAP, PBSAP. And a cornerstone, as I was describing earlier, of what a big important part of the success of the PBSAP is the ICCA. When you have 96 of the KBAs, or of the 101 KBAs in ancestral domains, then there's no way that it can succeed if the ICCAs are not given importance. So given that the Philippines is one of 17 or 18 na ba? 17 mega diverse countries. And the mega diverse countries are not isolated by themselves. There are interactions between the mega diverse countries. So take one away, has a big impact on the others. So in a way, this part, it will be hard to swallow, but there's some truth to it. No? So in fact, therefore, the recognition and operationalizing of supporting operationalizing the framework of ICCA means the survival of the human race. Oh, di ba? Di ba? If you just do that for all the 17 mega diverse countries, yun yung effect nun eh. It's a practical effect, it's cost effective, it's a big immediate impact that's measurable. In fact, their proposals, kasi walang measuring variables ang CBD, ang Aichi targets na ang isang ginagawang proposal ngayon is to make that as a standard for measuring, as she says, as measuring the targets of the Aichi. That's how important it is. And I say this now, not to the choir, so to speak, no. Not to preach to the choir. Sa DNR, kay Ma'am Norma, sa atin, Ma'am Tess, Alisa, kasi nandun na tayo sa trabahong yun eh. But when you said stakeholder earlier, and when I said I'm talking about the human race. And that's what I want to bring out to everyone who will hopefully listen to these words. That the concerns of the ICCA, it's a concern of everyone. So please take note. Yun lang po.
Thank you, Commissioner Jong. Yeah, totoo po yun, no, na the passage of the ICCA bill will really be a foundation that will help in the survival of the human population. I definitely agree with you, Commissioner Jong. So at this point, thank you for those parting words, Commissioner Jong, and it's always actually a pleasant undertaking to converse with you po, no, regarding these issues. Any parting words from you, Ms. Norms po, as we end this conversation?
Siguro is again, let me emphasize that the Bureau in particular sa amin pong division will always be there for concerns ng IPs, especially within protected areas. And we really support yung IPs for the initiatives that they are doing for our conservation of biodiversity. And I would like also to extend my thanks to Commissioner Jong. Well said po yung statement nyo kanina, and we will take note of that in our succeeding works, and we look forward to having the same partnership with NCIP for conservation and biodiversity natin, especially in protected areas. Yun lang po. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Norms and Commissioner Jong, for this conversation. From the UNDP Country Office, we are grateful for the partnership, and we would actually like to sustain this partnership po with you and our IP communities. No? Isa po tayo sa advocacy na ito, and we hope po that we'll reach more milestones together, helping and working with our IP communities. Marami pong salamat.